Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Steven here with Team Euphoric, and today I'm going to be taking you through 20 common neurological conditions along with targeted exercises you can perform to speed up your recovery and eliminate your pain. Now let's get started. The 12th neurological condition is Meralgia Paresthetica, which is when there is compression of the lateral femoral cutaneous nerve, causing burning pain in the lateral thigh. To treat this condition, nerve gliding exercises are terrific when prescribed correctly, specifically the femoral cutaneous nerve gliding exercises. First, here's how to perform the prone femoral cutaneous nerve gliding exercise. There are a couple of different components to this one. What we want to do though is start in a prone position, meaning we're going to be laying down on our stomach. And then from here, what we would want to do is maintaining just a neutral knee, neutral ankle. We want to take the hip into extension, and we're going to do 3 to 5 repetitions, and then ask yourself, if your symptoms have been reproduced, are your symptoms getting better, worse, or staying the same? If your symptoms have gotten worse or stayed the same, stop immediately. There is no need to continue the exercise. We don't want to exacerbate your symptoms. However, if your symptoms have gotten better, we can go ahead and continue with the exercise, and we are going to perform 20 repetitions of hip extension. Let's say you've done the hip extension and you haven't noticed a reproduction of your symptoms. What we would do is build tension on the nerve by adding a component of medial rotation. So we would go ahead, go into hip extension, maintain that hip extension, and do 3 to 5 repetitions of medial rotation. So you're going to be turning those toes in toward the midline. Ask yourself, after 3 to 5 repetitions, have my symptoms gotten better, worse, or stayed the same? If your symptoms have gotten worse or stayed the same, stop immediately. There is no need to continue the exercise. We don't want to exacerbate your symptoms. However, if your symptoms have gotten better, we are going to continue with the exercise, and you are going to perform 20 repetitions. So we're going to maintain that hip and extension, and then just rotate the thigh inward. 1, 2, and we're going to do 20 total repetitions. Another way in which we could do this exercise is we could combine the two movements together, make it a little bit more dynamic. So instead of maintaining a static hip extension while adding the medial rotation, we could do both. So in this case, what we would do is we would go hip extension, medial rotation, come back. Extension, hip, rotation. And then after 3 to 5 repetitions, ask yourself, have my symptoms gotten better, worse, or stayed the same? If they have gotten worse or stayed the same, stop immediately. There is no need to continue the test. However, if your symptoms have gotten better, then we would just perform it as an exercise and go 20 repetitions of hip extension, medial hip rotation, and just reset after each repetition. Next, here's how to perform the seated lateral femoral cutaneous nerve gliding exercise. We could do this in a standing position, and we could either be right up against a massage table, or we could even be holding onto a chair, holding onto a wall. Doesn't really matter. I've got the massage table set up, so I'm just going to be doing it against the massage table. But we would want to get our hips nice and squared up to the actual table, wall, chair, whatever you're using. And then from here, the first thing that we would want to do is with a neutral knee, neutral ankle, is just extend the hip. 3 to 5 repetitions, and then check in with ourselves and ask ourselves, have my symptoms either gotten better, worse, or stayed the same? If you've noticed that your symptoms have either gotten worse or stayed the same, we would immediately stop with the exercise. There is no need to continue. We don't want to exacerbate your symptoms. However, if you've noticed that there was an immediate improvement on your symptoms, what we would do is go ahead and perform 20 additional repetitions of hip extension with that neutral knee and neutral ankle. One thing worth noting, we want to make sure that we don't get any rotation of the spine. All of the movement should be coming from the hip. So you don't want to be turning your body out away. Keep that body squared up. The pelvis should be nice and locked in position, and you're just going into hip extension. Let's say that you've done the hip extension. You still haven't noticed a reproduction of your symptoms. What we could do is build more tension on the nerve by going into medial rotation. So you're going to turn those toes in for 3 to 5 repetitions while maintaining that hip extension. And once again, after 3 to 5 repetitions, we're going to ask ourselves, have my symptoms gotten better, worse, or have they stayed the same? If you've noticed that your symptoms have gotten worse or stayed the same, we're going to stop immediately because we don't want to exacerbate your symptoms. However, if we've noticed an immediate improvement, we would go ahead, keep that hip into extension, and we would do 20 repetitions of medial rotation. So we're going to turn those toes in toward the midline. That's if we wanted to do a little bit more proximal to distal and isolate the movements. We could also do a little bit of a combination. So one of the things that we could do is, instead of focusing on isolating each segment, we could do more of a little bit of a gliding motion. So what we could do is start in a position of medial rotation with the hip in neutral. And then what we could do is as we go into hip extension, we go into lateral rotation. As we come forward, we go into medial rotation. So when we go into hip extension and lateral rotation, and then hip flexion and medial rotation, what happens is we're losing a little bit of tension when we go into hip flexion, but we're building tension by going into medial. And then we're losing tension by going into lateral while building tension going into hip extension. So at one end, when we're building tension at one end, we're releasing tension at the other. And when we're releasing tension at one end, we're building tension at the other. And that is going to get us a little bit more of a gliding motion. So if you wanted to make this more active, more dynamic, as opposed to a little bit more static, those are a few of the different ways in which we could play around with the exercise in order to help release tension on the anterior femoral cutaneous nerve. The 13th neurological condition is foot drop. That was just a tiny taste of what can be found in my members only section. If you enjoyed it, become a member for only $5 a month to get access to hundreds of member only videos.